property number 2 for the year. Let's talk about 707 Walk Hill, Mattapan area of Boston. Another great property. Same model, the BRRRR strategy pretty much here, a little bit different. We are looking at, we bought land back in 2018 with the idea of taking it through zoning and seeing what we can get there. You have, for those of you who are not familiar, especially with Boston and especially with the zoning process, zoning is basically when you buy something and you want to change the use of it, you usually have to take it through your zoning board of approvals, and that's the ZBA here in Boston. And what that board is, what that city body does, is it basically says, we're going to look at the zoning. We're going to say, is this, you can't build a skyscraper in the middle of a residential neighborhood. They're not going to allow that. You're probably not going to build a single family in the middle of a commercial zone property, right? You're not going to have a Pizza Hut and then a single family right next door, ideally, right? Unless you're at the edges of a commercial zone in the beginning of a residential zone. So the zoning board basically says, we're going to look at what you're trying to do. You hire an architect, you hire a zoning attorney, you hire, other representatives to, canvass the neighborhood for you and help you out with letters of support from the other neighborhood. Because if the neighborhood has an issue with your project, you can have an issue with the zoning board. So we basically we went through, we bought this piece of land, and we basically said, this is a residential 3 to 4 family neighborhood. There's some 5 families here. It's a little bit of a mix. Let's get aggressive and let's try to go in as a 5 family and see what the zoning board says, knowing that they'll probably knock us down. Like, we thought that the bottom line or baseline based on an area, based on the land, was a 3 family. So we went in with 5, hoping that they would knock us down to 4, and we would end up building 4. Obviously, the more units we get, the more rental income we get, the more the larger value we have, or the larger that land is now valued. If we can put more units there, we get more housing, everything else, right? So 5 was a little bit of a push. We went in. The neighbors had a problem with that, as we expected. The city had a problem with it, as we expected. We went back to the drawing board. We knocked it down to a 4 unit. We pushed back on the neighborhood and said, we've made these changes. We're adding parking. There's not going to be as much density. Here are the things that we've adjusted. And now we're trying to get 4 units in there. It took us a little while, but we canvassed the neighborhood personally, me and business partners, and we went out and we basically collected the information that we needed to collect. And we went through zoning, a lot of back and forth, especially during COVID. Virtual meetings and a lot of things that took a little bit longer than they were supposed to, but we ended up getting 4 units approved on our piece of land, which was great news. Then after the 4 units has been approved, now we have to go through the design board and a couple other checkpoints through the city, and then it's submitting plans for permitting, which we're in the process of right now, getting the permits before we can put a shovel in the ground. So you're talking about all that, roughly 2 years of a process. But what we've done is we bought the land for about $130,000. And as soon as we came out of zoning, as soon as zoning said, yes, you've been approved, that land immediately now repurposed to now build, or we're allowing us to build, probably increased in value, I would say, by at least double. That land immediately went from 130 to 260, 275, somewhere around there, maybe even 300,000 with that permit. Meaning we probably could have taken that approval plus the land and sold it to another developer, but we decided to continue to build ourselves. So bought the land, 130. Let's call it. Let's keep math very, very simple here. We probably put about $70,000 into the zoning process, paying our attorney, paying the architect, paying the design fees, paying the, just everything to get through that process. Very expensive process. So we were into it for, let's take roughly 200,000. At the time it was worth 275 or 3. So we've created a little equity there as well. So let's say we're into the land for 200,000. Then we went back to the drawing board. We talked to our contractors and everything else, and contractors said it's going to cost you about $800,000 to build this piece of property, right? So $130 to buy, $70,000 to improve, $800,000 to build. And again, these numbers are not exact numbers, but I'm trying to get them as clean as possible so we don't get too much in the weeds here. And then let's call it another $100,000 for just random other, financing cost and points paid and lender and holding costs. Because remember, as we're improving this land, who's paying the taxes on it? Us. As we're, building the building, another 9 months to build, who's paying the taxes? Who's paying the, the utilities? There's no rental income incoming yet, right? So all of the insurance is super expensive on something like this. So let's call it another 100,000 just to keep it really, really simple. So 130 purchase, 70,000 improvements to get us through zoning, all in for 200. Another 800 to build, another $100,000 for financing and holding costs and random other fees. We're into the building for $1.1 million. We have an appraisal that puts the building at roughly $1.5 million when it's set, 1.49 something when it's all said and done. So if you look at that, we're basically creating about $400,000 in equity there. So again, same thing. The model is, how do we increase our net worth? How do we build wealth? How do we, it's this BRRRR strategy. It's the thing that the BRRRR strategy, and the reason I love it is you can continue to build and repeat and rinse. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to try to pull our money back out of this thing once it's all said and done. We should have a chunk of equity, $400,000 in equity in this thing. We'll go back to the bank, and the bank now knows what we're trying to do. So the bank is actually trying to help us and speed up the process. Instead of having to refi, they provide us what's called an earned out, meaning on the other end, if we hit certain metrics, if we hit the rent increases, or the rental income numbers that we expect to hit, and we perform, the bank is now basically saying, instead of you having to refi, keep the loan with us, keep it. We're going to basically already have this money sitting aside and ready to disperse to you if you perform the way you say you're going to perform. Bring it back to the net worth. $400,000. I own roughly, let's call it, I think it's 33% or 35%. I'm not even going to do the math. I'm just basically going to say, I'm going to call it 25% just to keep the numbers nice and real simple here. $400,000. If everything goes to plan, everything goes smoothly, I will increase my net worth by another $100,000 at the completion of this project. A little bit more. You can call it 150, you can round up to 150, or you can round, down to 100, or call it somewhere 125. I've never done the exact math because I'm more focused on getting the project built, getting it leased up, and getting it moving forward. But another great project, that's going to help, push that number closer to $1 million within a 12-month time frame.